Happy 2026, everybody. Since it's a new year and 2025 is in the rearview mirror, that means it's time for the top 10 favorite films of the past year, 2025. I know this video is coming out a little bit later. I'm recording it in late January. The reason for that is because I don't live in New York or LA, and I'm not a professional film critic, so I don't get screeners, and I have to wait for movies to roll out through some of the rest of the country before I can see it in the theater. So I've now seen almost everything from 2025 that I thought had a chance of making this list, so I figured it was time to solidify a top 10 list, and there you go. 2025, as far as movies are concerned, was a pretty good year. I think 2024 was a little better. The reason for that is I've been keeping track through Letterboxd of any movie that I rate at 4 stars or higher. 4 stars, like the bottom of 4 stars for me is like an A-, so I would consider anything at 4 stars or higher great, whereas 3.5 is like a B+, so I'd only consider that very good. So that's usually where my cutoff point is of things that might get considered to be in a top 10 list. So when I looked at movies that I was looking forward to for 2025 going into it, and then ones that actually lived up to my expectation, there weren't as many that I thought there would be. There were certain movies like Begonia that I ended up only giving 3.5 stars to, and since that Yorgos Lanthimos and I loved Kinds of Kindness, I'm like the only person who loved Kinds of Kindness, I was expecting that to hit me better, and there's a couple other examples of that throughout the year. But there was still a healthy bevy of great movies in 2025, so we'll go into them. In total, I had 17 movies in 2025 that I rated at 4 stars or higher. So to cut off this list at 10, I end up having 7 honorable mentions, and so I'll just run through them. I say quickly, but it'll probably take a while. Quickly over here. In no particular order, those movies include Weapons, Zach Cregger's follow-up to Barbarian. I liked Barbarian more, which is probably why Weapons didn't make the top 10 for me. Also, the horror genre, as terms of theatrically released horror movies, they're kind of bifurcated right now, where you have like the art house ones, your A24 Neon movie distributed ones, and then you have your studio mainstream normie horror movies. That's like your Blumhouse, your Conjuring, that kind of shit. Weapons doesn't really fit in either of those categories. It was released by Warner Brothers, so it was released by a major studio, it was a big hit, but it feels deeper and more multi-layered than your average normie studio horror movie, but it didn't feel as like artful as some of the stuff that's coming out of the indie market or coming from international. So it's sort of in the middle there. I still think it was an excellent film. That's why it's an honorable mention. If it just didn't quite kick up higher there for me. Happy that Amy Madigan got a Best Supporting Actress Oscar nomination out of it, though, because as Aunt Gladys, that was certainly a showstopper. Caught Stealing, that was Darren Aronofsky's new film. You know, Darren Aronofsky's been kind of out in the weeds doing his like movies that are kind of about religion for a while. He did Noah, he did Mother, and then he did The Whale. Caught Stealing, it was advertised as like a silly movie. And so it seemed a little outside of Aronofsky's wheelhouse, and I thought maybe he was just doing like a paycheck movie because, you know, his last 3 haven't exactly hit well with the critics or audiences as much. Well, Whale did get some Oscars. But then I saw the movie, and it's darker than you'd think. It's a very dark comedy. It's got a lot of like after hours energy to it, where there's, you know, a guy who's in over his head, but he's also got, you know, his past trauma going on, and some dark violent shit happens in it. And once I saw the movie, I'm like, 1, I really like this movie quite a bit, and 2, it's a lot more in Aronofsky's wheelhouse than I expected. He didn't write the movie. It's based on a novel. I believe the author of the novel also wrote the screenplay adaptation for it. But I was very surprised. I walked into that movie with kind of like low, middling expectations, and by the end of it, I was like, yeah, I really like this movie. This is great. It didn't hit everyone as well as it hit me, and it underperformed at the box office, but I happen to really like it, so it's on the list. It was Just an Accident, Jafar Panahi's Palme d'Or winning film. There were a couple international films, even ones that premiered at Cannes, that I liked more than this. but it's still a great film. I really like movies that are about moral ambiguity and what people should do in difficult moral situations. And it was Just an Accident about a guy who's tortured by the Iranian regime. He thinks he's identified his torturer, and so he gets together with other victims of the regime to see what they should do with it, if it should be like revenge and all that stuff. So I like that part of it. I guess the reason it didn't make the top 10 is because I have some qualms with where the story goes and how it ends. Not the very last scene, because the very last scene is excellent. But where the story resolves, I am not on board with that from like my own personal standpoint. Not that the movie is bad, it's more of a me thing as far as like my attitudes toward revenge and evil governments and things and the proper way to go about that. But it's a very rich movie, and most of the actors are non-professional actors, so it was very interesting to see like these amateur people do such a great job with these pretty meaty roles. And obviously, Jafar Panahi's been making films in Iran, against the wishes of the Iranian government. They've, they want to give him a year in prison in absentia for making this movie and other stuff. So, it's also like the very act of the film's existence is a political act an act of rebellion. So you kind of have to respect that, but it's also a very great movie as well. So that makes this list as well. Bring Her Back, the new movie by the Filippos. They made Talk to Me, which was my second favorite film of the year that it came out. Bring Her Back I didn't like as much as Talk to Me, but I still thought it was great. There was some backlash against this movie. I guess there are some people who don't like their version of like extreme gut-wrenching horror in some places, because there's some pretty gnarly things that happen in Bring Her Back. I guess there's some critics who don't think the Filippos are doing that material responsibly. I disagree with them. I think the film was great. Sally Hawkins is excellent in the lead adult performance. Another complaint I saw about the movie was people had issues with some things in the exposition as far as not being explained very well. Particularly there's like some like dark web VHS tape from Russia that sort of explains the mythology of what's going on in the movie. Some people thought that should have been extrapolated upon more. I thought there was enough in the movie to go on. I didn't think it needed any more than what we got. I think you can connect the dots on your own. You can do a little lead work, and the movie doesn't have to spoon feed you. But as far as this kind of like dark spin on like a Pet Sematary type of idea, I thought it was pretty fantastic. My actual weird complaint, because I like extreme horror movies, is that I thought the ending could have been more depressing and darker than it actually is. But apparently the movie was too dark for most people, so that's me. But the guy who likes French extremity, extreme horror stuff, I was hoping there'd be a bit more of a gut punch at the end. But otherwise, Bring Her Back was great. Lurker. Lurker was kind of a surprise, in fact, of how much I liked it. I think as the guy who made the movie also made Beef, the miniseries on Netflix, and I didn't care for Beef, even though everyone else loved that. But what I really liked about Lurker, because we're getting a lot of movies in the last couple years for obvious reasons that are about influencers or parasocial relationships online and things like that. Ingrid Goes West was a very good movie a few years ago that was more comedic with Aubrey Plaza. But what I really liked about Lurker is it took a different approach. A lot of these movies are about like a parasitic relationship between like a hanger-on or a fan or someone and the object of their affection, desire, fantasy, whatever. And Lurker was more of a symbiotic relationship. It shows not just how like the creepy fan guy is latching onto this up and coming singer, but how the singer also kind of needs this fan as well. And that's an angle I haven't really seen any of these like influencer or starfucker fame movies kind of like go for, and I really liked how that worked on it as well. So yeah, Lurker was a good surprise, and I really enjoyed that. Sorry Baby. This premiered at Sundance a year ago, and I heard really good things about it. But I wasn't sure about the subject matter to go see it in theaters. So then I watched it on streaming, and for the first like half an hour or so of the movie, I'm like, okay, this is good, but I don't get why everyone loves it. But then by the end of the film, it had won me over. It's kind of interesting. There was Luca Guadagnino had a film called After the Hunt that came out this year, and it's sort of about a sex scandal, Me Too kind of thing on a college campus. And considering how much I really like Guadagnino's work, that film was a disappointment, even though I liked it more than some other people. But Sorry Baby ended up being the better movie about somewhat similar material. And a lot of it is because it's not about like the culture wars or the label of Me Too or anything like that. It's just focused on the protagonist, who's played by the Ava Victor, who wrote and directed the film as well, and her like life journey through that and how she kind of copes with it in a way that's funny but also heartbreaking, but not what we normally see in movies, but also feels more realistic than we normally see in movies about this. And you know, it kind of quietly convinced me of its greatness as it went on. Plus, there's a very cute cat in the movie, and a cute cat is always gonna win you over in some way. So, yeah, Sorry Baby was really, really good. And then last of the honorable mentions is The Perfect Neighbor. This also premiered at Sundance about a year ago, and it's a documentary that is comprised almost entirely of body cam footage from police. And it's basically about a neighborhood dispute between a Karen and who's white, obviously, and the neighbors around her, many of whom are of color, and how things sort of escalate through her general complaining and self-entitlement and overall fuckery. It just got nominated for Best Documentary Feature at the Oscars. I've heard some rumblings that some people are they think some parts of the movie are unethical, but I haven't seen what the detail of that is. Maybe it's because it is made up of, you know, the body cam footage and everything. I don't think the movie is propaganda at all. If anything, it kind of shows the impotence of modern policing to deal with issues like this and try to keep them from escalating. It kind of reveals how like feckless, impotent the police are to deal with these things. Though I guess there's a lot of controversy now about how any sort of body cam footage that doesn't make the cops look bad, you can kind of easily FOIA, and then people have been making like clickbait YouTube compilations of this stuff, and the ethics of that are dicey. But I think using this footage as well as news footage and some other stuff in the form of this documentary, I think is for a good purpose, and I think it ends up being an interesting use of form to elaborate this particular content. There was a Oscar-nominated documentary short from the previous year called Incident that I think is actually better, even though it's shorter, and it's kind of the same thing. It uses like public security cam footage and body cams, and no like narration or anything. It just kind of uses that and lets you draw your conclusions through editing and stuff. That was a little bit better, even though it's only a short, but Perfect Neighbor was still very good. And now for the top 10 list in ascending order. Number 10 is going to be The Ugly Stepsister. This was a Norwegian film that Shudder acquired the rights to. It recently got an Oscar nomination for Best Makeup and Hairstyling, which it deserves, because there's this was probably the film that had the only thing I saw in a movie this year that made me queasy from some of the special prosthetics and makeup effects. That was good. The movie is basically a horror spin on Cinderella from the point of view of one of the stepsisters. And I know we're getting a lot of like low budget schlock that's based on public domain stuff, whether it's fairy tales or Winnie the Pooh and Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie stuff. But I thought this did an interesting job of changing the POV to make a different point about patriarchal standards of beauty and sort of the history of, you know, how these sort of like wedding people off for dowries and things like that used to happen. And of course it is like a gnarly horror movie. I mean, I'm notoriously hard to let people know if something is scary or not, because I don't find any movie scary. and I haven't since I was a child. I don't even quite know what people mean when they say that. Like, do you watch a movie and you're fearful for your life? Like, I get, like, disturbed or disgusted or whatever, but I don't understand what people mean by scared. Maybe they mean jump scare, but even that is not being scared. That's being startled. That's like, you know, if a woodpecker pecks on your window accidentally, that's like a involuntary reaction. But I don't know, that's another story about how I define movies, horror movies. So it's not like, if you're looking for something horror because you're looking for something that's scary, I guess, then it's not that. It will make you like queasy and disturbed, and there's some gore and some gnarly stuff in there. But it's more, it also has like a darkly comic tone to it for a lot of it. But it was just kind of, you know, previous year we got The Substance, and obviously that was talking about female beauty standards and patriarchal systems, though that, you know, was set in the contemporary age. And you're seeing like some stuff that's going over that, that Ryan Murphy thing, The Beauty, which I'm really pissed off because he's a no talent hack, but I've read the comic book that's based on it. It's good. Or there was that Elizabeth Smart movie I haven't seen, that was directed by the guy who plays the killer in Jigsaw, or Saw, Spiral rather. Spoilers for Spiral from the Book of Saw. But, so we're getting a lot of movies that are kind of about that. That's just kind of in the zeitgeist right now. But I thought this did an excellent job at going through those themes in a sort of a clever way of taking this like fairy tale spin. It's still heightened, but it's more of a, I hate the word grounded because it's not, I wouldn't describe the movie as grounded, but it's not as fantastical as like a Cinderella would be. You know, there's no like magical fairy godmother. There's other things that take those roles in there, and you know, it's not talking mice or anything. But yeah, Ugly Stepsister is great. If you do watch it on streaming, because I think it's on Shudder, I think it's on Hulu, watch it with the subtitles, because, as I did, because I learned later that when they put in English dubbed version, the dubbing was done by generative AI. So that's a piece of shit. So fuck whoever was responsible for that decision. But so yeah, watch the subtitle version. I mean, you should probably watch subtitles for any foreign film anyway, unless you have some sort of like disability or accommodation that prevents you from reading subtitles. But because you get the original actor's performance, I think that's very important to the movie, but that's neither here nor there. Number 9 is Materialists. This was Celine Song's follow-up to Past Lives, which made my 10 best list the year that came out. Materialist is another, I feel like I'm playing defense for some of these movies, where Materialist was another movie where a lot of people didn't like it, and the reasons they didn't like it, I think, quite frankly, are stupid. So A24 marketed it as a standard rom-com. That is not what it is at all. So I understand people walking into the movie and then they feel like they're bait and switched. What the movie is an examination of how capitalism has perverted and destroyed how we look at dating and romantic relationships in the modern era. Because the film's about like a matchmaker. She specifically tries to match people on like a higher economic bracket in New York City, and so obviously the women are after shallow things like a man's income and his height, and the men are after shallow things like a youthful age and, you know, regular like mainstream beauty standards and things like that, and how, you know, how dating has turned from something about trying to find, you know, true love and the person you want to be with, and it's treated more as like a commodities market where people are of more high value and everything. It's basically reduced human beings to commodities. It is like the ultimate perversion of the personal realm by capitalism. But then people nitpicked, you know, there's a lot of people online have a hate boner for Dakota Johnson for whatever reason, or people were saying it was like poor man propaganda, which Celine Song eloquently pushed back on in a Letterboxd YouTube video interview, I believe. Or people were just sick of Pedro Pascal because he was in like 9 movies this past year. I think a lot of the criticisms of the movie are superficial and not very intelligently rigorous. Like, it's not a perfect movie by any means, but I thought it was one of the best movies of the year, and I was thoroughly impressed by it. I mean, I'm a Marxist. I'm conditioned to watch movies, to love movies that have anti-capitalist messaging anyway. But I feel like there was a backlash to the movie that was in bad faith, as opposed to people wanting to take the movie on its own terms. Or people had nitpicky ideas, like they thought that the Dakota Johnson character's stated income wasn't high enough for what she does or where she lives or whatever. It was all just kind of nitpicky bullshit. So let's just say I kind of look down on the people who didn't like this movie, because I have yet to see a criticism of the movie that I feel is valid. Also, as a side note, my most liked review on Letterboxd was my review for Materialists. I don't remember how many likes I get. Because I write full-length reviews, like thousands of words or more, and not like one-line, like tweet jokes, I don't get a lot of likes on my reviews, so the fact that I got like double digits on that one was pretty cool. I think some of it had to do with the fact that I went to see an early screening of it, so I was jumping the gun on some stuff. But yeah, Materialist was great. Don't listen to the haters, judge it for yourself. Number 8 is going to be Presence. Steven Soderbergh had 2 movies that released in theaters in 2025. Most of the attention went to Black Bag, a movie I really liked but didn't love. But the first one that was released in January of last year was Presence, and it even premiered a year before that at Sundance. So some people have counted it as a 2024 film. I'm counting it as 2025 because that's when it was theatrically released for the masses and not just in festivals. It's easy to dismiss Presence as a gimmick movie because the conceit of the film is that it's all shot from the POV of a ghost in this house. So it's like a haunted house movie from the POV of a ghost. And there's a lot of very interesting camera work to be able to pull off that conceit. And I feel like a lot of people who see the movie are just viewing it as the gimmick, and that's it. But I was very impressed by the story that the gimmick is being used to tell. Specifically, it gets into spoilers to say why, but let's just say that by the third act of the film, there is a clear villain, and who that villain is and what they attempt to do is key to the film's themes. And there's a heavy contrast to that in the father of the family that lives in this haunted house. He is probably the most likable good father in a movie I've seen in a while, because film does not have a lot of good fathers in it. Everyone who has father issues puts that into their screenplays. There are very few good fathers in movies. You just think about it for a little bit. They're not completely a desert of them, but So I really liked how this film dealt with the contrast between the father character and his like good faith attempt to be a good father and to support particularly his daughter, but also his son and his wife, who has played by Lucy Liu, who has other stuff going on, and who the villain is and what he is representative of in society today. I guess I can at least say that it's about sort of like toxic masculinity and how that is being expressed through culture, and the father is an antidote to that. I thought the film rose above just being the gimmick of the camera is a ghost, and rose above how showy some of that camera work is if you know what's happening behind the camera, and why they have like 9 lamps lit at the same time to provide source lighting and everything. So that the movie ended up having an emotional kick for me and not just an aesthetic kick over the style of it all. So yeah, Presence stayed with me for 12 months, where I'm like, this is probably one of the best films of the year for me. Even when Black Bag came out and more people liked that one, I was like, no, I'm gonna be ride or die for Presence, So yet another film I feel like I need to defend. The next movie on the list will have more people who like it, so I won't feel as much to defend it. So we'll jump to that one. Number 7 is Sinners, Ryan Coogler's Jim Crow era American story that turns into a vampire story. So you've probably seen Sinners. Everyone's seen Sinners. It just broke the record for the most Oscar nominations for a single film. Beat it by 2. And so even if the new best casting category didn't exist, it would still beat the record by 1. Sinners, I don't know. What can I say about Sinners that hasn't already been said? Well, I guess I'll say this. Considering the title of the movie is Sinners, I haven't seen many people talk about the religious themes of the movies, particularly how the movie makes a point of criticizing the role that the Christian church has played in the Black American experience. It reminds me of back in 2016, I went to this atheist rally in Washington, D.C. called Reason Rally, and one of the opening poets read this poem about basically criticizing his fellow African Americans for still believing in Jesus or God when they were brought over here as slaves. It's like, what good has this religion brought to you, kind of thing. And Sinners is kind of a lot like that, where it's, the religion is standing in the way of Miles Canton getting his dream of wanting to be this musician and everything. And I'm surprised that obviously like the racial component of the movie is front and center, the historical stuff, the cultural appropriation, the role of music and storytelling and in culture. But the criticism of Christianity and its role in the lives of Black Americans is a theme I haven't seen as many people talk about, and yet that was, maybe just because I'm a religion-hating atheist myself, that was one that I kind of latched onto. And I think with a title like Sinners, you would think that would be more discussed about the movie. If it's not higher on this list, it might just be because I have a nitpick about the third act, where I feel like Ryan Coogler wrote himself into a corner as far as how to get the vampires into the bar in a way that made sense, because they have to be invited in. And so the way that he eventually accomplishes that, I don't think works. It feels very abrupt and very, not Deus Ex Machina, but it feels very like, okay, I'm just going to have one character do something stupid because otherwise I can't end the movie or I can't get to a climax here. So that little nitpick is there, but otherwise, I mean, look, most people liked Sinners, I think. It was a big hit commercially. It did well critically. I'm not sure I need to sell you on Sinners. You've probably already seen it, and if you haven't, it's on Max, and because it's a Best Picture nominee, it will be re-released in theaters over the next couple months. So check it out for yourself if you haven't. Number 6 is also a Best Picture nominee. It's Josh Safdie's Marty Supreme. I've already talked about my love of anti-capitalist art, and what I latched onto with Marty Supreme is that the character of Marty Moser, played by Timothée Chalamet, is basically, he's kind of like Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler, where he is the personification of the evils of the capitalist grind set. He doesn't murder anybody, but he's definitely the 1950s version of hustle culture, and he lies and manipulates and steamrolls over anyone he sees fit in order to try to accomplish his goal. The movie is very funny. It's got like an interesting like character study of this guy and what he is about America. And the theme of the movie kind of hit me with the fact that even though it takes place in the 50s, a lot of the music are songs from the 80s, Forever Young, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. The score is a little bit more 80s sounding, like electronic synth stuff. And so, it reminded me of how like the 2 decades that can most be associated with American nationalism and rah-rah capitalism would be the 50s, because modern American right-wingers think the 1950s in the United States looked like Leave It to Beaver, and the 80s, which was the Reagan era and the Wall Street Masters of the Universe kind of stuff. Master of the Universe from the Bonfire of the Vanities novel, not from He-Man. And so the connection of those 2 decades being the encapsulation of the evils of American capitalism and their propaganda within the world really struck me. And obviously the people have been confused about the scene about the Holocaust survivor with the honey on him, and I thought that was pretty easy to read, that was like a selfless act, that was like the height of selflessness against the selfishness that is inherent in the capitalist mode of production. So yeah, that's sort of my encapsulated take. You can read my full-length reviews for all of these movies on Letterboxd if you want my more articulate themes, because I'm more articulate in the written word than I am in the spoken word. But yeah, I love Marty Supreme. It's great. Number 5, How Dark You Willing to Go? David Cronenberg's The Shrouds. A lot of Cronenberg, both David and his son Brandon, have made the top film of the year for me. Crimes of the Future, that was David Cronenberg's last movie. That was my favorite film of the year. That came out. Infinity Pool, a controversial pick for number 1 apparently, was my favorite film of the year. That came out. So The Shrouds didn't quite get as high on my list, but I loved it. It's so The Shrouds was going to be a Netflix TV show, but Netflix passed on it. And so much like when David Lynch turned Mulholland Drive from a TV pilot into a movie, Cronenberg revamped The Shrouds into a feature film. And, there's a lot of like playfulness in the movie about David Cronenberg talking about, him being like the body horror guy and him sort of like playfully reconciling with that label. But mostly the movie is about the grief over him losing his longtime wife, Denise Cronenberg, who died a few years back. She was like the costume designer in a lot of his movies and everything. And we're getting a lot of movies about grief these days, especially in the horror genre. The Shrouds isn't quite horror, but never mind that. But this felt very much Cronenberg, very much his like unique expression of what the pain of that feels like, and also like in a non-conventional way that we always view grief as like lost potential time with someone or memories that can't be replicated and things like that, but he has like Cronenberg, like myself, is an atheist, or at least doesn't believe in anything supernatural or an afterlife or anything. So sometimes he focuses on the empirical or the tangible, and the idea of a connection to the tangible remains of the person you loved. I don't really see that expressed in film all that often, and so that was a very interesting thing for me. Also, Guy Pearce, who should have won Best Supporting Actor last year at the Oscars for The Brutalist, gives also a great, completely 180 performance in The Shrouds. So, yeah, I mean, if you're a Cronenberg freak like me, then, The Shrouds is great. And, I don't know if he's going to end up making another directorial feature at this point. Supposedly his novel Consumed, he's working on turning that into a film, but he's getting up there in age, so if this ends up being his last feature, it is a nice little like cap on it. I hope it's not. I hope he has many more in him if possible. But yeah, Shrouds was one of the movies I was desperately looking forward to in 2025 because it premiered at Cannes in 2024, and it lived up to my expectations. Number 4, don't know if this is really controversial or not, The Long Walk. The Long Walk is based on a Stephen King novel, which was published under the name Richard Bachman. And the novel itself was sort of a metaphor for the Vietnam War. And in the modern era, it has been transposed into being something a little different here. But there are some ways, it's been like maybe 20 years since I read the book, so I'm not up on all of the minute differences between the novel and the film. But I felt that the film did an excellent job of making it a character-centered dystopia And also, it's got to be really hard to make a movie that's just about a group of 50 boys just walking down a deserted street. Like, how to shoot that while making it feel interesting, how to pace that movie so it doesn't feel too long or too short. I ended up really loving the movie. I do have a few caveats with it. Some of the CGI effects on a few of the gore moments I'd prefer wholly practical. The villain is played by Mark Hamill, who... Between this and The Life of Chuck, I don't think he's a very good actor. Like, he's a great voice actor. Obviously, we all love him from the original Star Wars movies and everything. But he tends to go a little too broad and over the top with a lot of his other roles. And I think he was a little that as the Major in The Long Walk. I guess a lot of people also were detracted from it because we've gotten a lot of like dystopia game show or reality show movies. I think The Long Walk is a little bit different from that. They did change it from the book, where in the book there are bystanders who are allowed to watch it on the sides as if it were a parade, and in the movie they're not allowed except for at a couple areas, and they're mostly just kind of like filmed from the tanks and everything. So that gives it more of a TV show thing. But I think the people who were comparing it to, The Hunger Games, because this was the same director as a few of the Hunger Games movies, or The Running Man, which had a new version of it, also came out in 2025. I don't think it really fits into that so much. It's more that it's about how propaganda seeps through into fascism, and how people just sort of like comply and acquiesce with these bad systems until it becomes like endemic to where they almost believe it, and it's only through like connection and solidarity that you can fight that sort of system. But I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, and I'm not articulating the messaging of the film very well. But I like that it was able to have like these broad political, like surface level themes, but still remain very character focused, and to have a lot of like emotional heart and gut punch. Like the Judy Greer, she's only in like 2 scenes of the movie, and she's like excellent. She's like heartbreaking. Maybe 3 scenes as a flashback too. Or just like the suspense and anxiety you feel with the boys walking. Especially there's a scene in the film where it's at night and they're having to walk uphill in the rain, and it is probably the most suspenseful, intense scene of any movie all year. So yeah, this movie gave me like a visceral, emotional reaction, which not all movies do all the time. So yeah, it made it pretty damn high on my list. So yeah. Number 3 is Park Chan-wook's No Other Choice. At the beginning of this video, I didn't talk about what 2025 was to me personally, but let's just say some bad shit happened in the year, and 2026 is starting off. It's going to be probably a hard year, especially when it comes to me occupationally. So a movie about the struggles of a man who's been laid off hit pretty close to home right now. Look, I love Park Chan-wook. Old Boy is one of my favorite films. I love Lady Vengeance, Thirst. He's made a lot of like great movies, and I love No Other Choice. Earlier this year, I did go back and I watched a movie called The Axe. It's from 2004, I want to say, from Costas Garvis. It was a French movie, and it's based on the same novel that No Other Choice is based on. And I thought The Axe was great, but I think No Other Choice was actually even better. And part of that is because the tone is... Both movies are still dark comedies, but The Axe is a little bit more like bitter and acidic and angry, and No Other Choice is allowed to be a little goofier and sometimes even slapstick in some scenes without losing the edge of its satire or its messaging. And, Park Chan-wook is just like how No Other Choice was shut out completely from the Oscars. I don't know if that's because there was a little bit of controversy with the writer's strike, where Park Chan-wook may have done some stuff on his limited series that he worked on with Don McKellar, who's also a screenwriter on No Other Choice. There's 4 writers on it. where they ended up getting expelled from the WGA. It seemed like it was more of a misunderstanding than full-on scabbing, but there may have been some backlash to that. But the Academy's just never really liked Park Chan-wook or his movies. Decision to Leave didn't get any nominations. Old Boy at least won second prize at the Cannes Film Festival, but nothing at Oscars. So the Oscars just don't like Park Chan-wook, which is a shame because it's one of the best international films I saw all year. And it's also just a gorgeous looking movie. Like the shot composition and the mise en scène and the shot choices that Park Chan-wook goes for are just like next level, like mind blowing. Like the cinematographer, the focus puller, they seem to be on point with some of these shots, especially the way they sometimes have to move within the frame. The editing is like pitch perfect as far as getting like pacing and delivering, drawing your attention to places. It's just, the performances, they're pretty stellar. The movie is very funny. It's got like the gallows humor, but it also has like more not uplifting, but lighter humor on top of that, sillier stuff even. It's just like an overall excellent time at the movies. And I don't know what was going on in France when The Axe came out. Apparently they were having like high levels of unemployment at the time, so it makes sense why that movie would come out around that time. Obviously the economy is shit in most of the world here. I assume it's the same in South Korea, but here in the United States we've got like massive inflation, massive unemployment and underemployment. Trying to find a job is difficult. There's a lot of like job openings that aren't for real jobs. They have companies that AI searching cover letters and resumes. It's a fucking dystopia out there economically. Between the inflation that was caused in COVID due to supply chain shortages and then just corporate price gouging because they can, plus the tariffs and the fascist piece of shit in the White House right now. It's a little rough out there. So the economy has been shit, and so this movie kind of comes right at a time when it's sort of like pitched to the zeitgeist. But I like this movie more than Decision to Leave. I wasn't as hot on Decision to Leave as a lot of other people were. Still a very good movie, but No Other Choice was certainly my bag, which is why it's as high up on my top 10 list as it is. Number 2 is One Battle After Another, Paul Thomas Anderson's latest film. Look, I love PTA. You probably love PTA. I even love Licorice Pizza, which that movie had its detractors for stupid reasons as well. Paul Thomas Anderson has been like churning out like masterpiece after masterpiece since I was in high school. Boogie Nights, Magnolia, There Will Be Blood. I mean, even like the movies of his that I'm not a huge fan of. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Phantom Thread or Heart 8. They're still like at an elevated level from what anyone else is doing right now. It's insane, like the quality of the work this man has been able to put out. And he got the biggest budget that he's ever had, and he makes what is a mainstream film. It didn't make as much money as I'm sure Warner Brothers was hoping. It'll probably be profitable on ancillaries though, with all the awards and stuff. And it's right now it's the front runner for Best Picture at the Oscars, as well as like director and adapted screenplay. We'll see if that pans out. It's still like 2 months away from the Oscars or something. But with the larger budget and the larger canvas, he was able to make this politically incisive yet very funny, like partly action movie, partly drama, with some of the most quotable lines and interesting characters and costume choices of any movie that came out in 2025, Lots of people have been quoting, A Few Small Beers or, Comrade Josh, that's a stupid name, or any of the things from the movie. So, Yeah, there's a little bit of discourse of the movie about its racial, how it handles its racial stuff, and I get that. It is, at the end of the day, it's a white guy who made the movie. But I think it handled everything very well. And to my fellow Marxists who are upset that the movie makes fun of revolutionaries, sometimes you need to be okay with making fun of yourself. And I think the movie does draw a clear line between the French 75 and their not very efficacious performative, Weather Underground type stuff. And then there's, Sensei Sergio, who's actually running like an underground railroad of immigrants and actually doing some on-the-ground work that is good praxis. So, I don't know, there's a lot of excellent things about the movie I could talk about, and I wrote a very long review when I saw the movie, and I've watched the movie twice. The last time was just a few nights ago, from when I'm recording this. And, it didn't quite make the top of my list. There's one other movie I liked more than this, but it made a lot of other people's top lists. It's winning lots of critics awards. It'll probably win the Oscar. We'll see. But yeah, this is one of the times where one of these like very acclaimed movies isn't overhyped. It is as excellent as people are saying. So if you haven't watched it yet for some weird reason, it's on HBO Max. It'll be back in theaters with the Best Picture nominees and all that stuff. I think it's getting a re-release in IMAX and 70mm if you're lucky enough to live near a 70mm projector. So yeah, go see it. And finally, my favorite film of 2025 comes from Brazil, and it is The Secret Agent. Yeah, a lot of political movies this year, I guess. The Secret Agent takes place in the 70s in Brazil during the military dictatorship, much like I'm Still Here did last year. I believe that made my top 10 last year as well. Not sure what's going on in Brazil right now, that it seems, at least from an outsider's perspective, that they're making more movies about this time. I don't know if it's about Bolsonaro or something else going on. But at a time where, the president has secret police full of Nazis murdering people in the streets for no reason, it seems very cogent, or it seems very timely to have these movies about living under a fascist military dictatorship coming out that we can watch and kind of learn from. So most of the movie takes place during the 70s at that time, and it's not just the time period of the movie, but many parts of the movie also emulate 70s movie making, split diopter shots like a De Palma film. So a lot of the movie is sort of like paced and shot like a 70s conspiracy thriller movie, like The Conversation or 3 Days of the Condor or something like that. And it's when this movie premiered at Cannes, it won Best Director and Best Actor at Cannes, if I'm not mistaken, back in May. When it premiered at Cannes, I heard that some people were like lost on the plot or whatever. I thought the plot was easy to follow, so sue me on that one. But I thought this was a fantastic movie about living under fascism and the difficulties of maneuvering around that and trying to have a life through that, and the evils of the system in that, and the way that capitalism and the business is intertwined with a fascist government, since the main villain of the movie is technically not a government official. He's a executive of a company. There's also playful things about the movie. There's a whole sequence involving a leg that I won't talk about much here. There's this wonderful, like, little communist old woman in the movie who's, like, the most delightful supporting character of any movie I saw in 2025. It's like the overall theme of the movie, though, really hits me, because as someone who is radicalized by the Bush administration and is forever angry that the people who launched us into an illegal war killed a bunch of innocent people, tortured people, and no one was held accountable for this shit, angers me. And the movie is largely about how we let people get away with horrendous crimes and we just forget about them and move on. And there's the danger of these things happening again because the people weren't punished before. And if people weren't punished before, then people will say they can get away with it. the George W. Bush getting away with torture and the Patriot Act shit paved the way for Donald Trump and all of his evil shit that he's doing right now. There's a direct line there. And a lot of The Secret Agent is about sort of reclaiming that forgotten memory of the evils of the past so that we can attempt to prevent it from happening again, even if it's painful to think about and we'd rather move on and say that was in the past and it's done. Maybe it's my autistic sense of justice or whatever, but it irks me to no end that the truly evil people never get punished. It rains on the just and the unjust alike, and karma doesn't exist. So the only justice we have is here on Earth, and we can't do it. I mean, even now, the Supreme Court has basically given the president immunity for crimes he commits unless they're not official acts, and who the fuck knows what's official or unofficial, just, a bunch of corrupt fucking assholes on the Supreme Court. When the main character of the movie talks about the villain and says, I'd kill him with a hammer, yeah, I felt that. I made that screen cap my banner on a number of my social media sites. I think of all the movies that I saw in 2025, the one that most oppressed me, the one that most hit me, the one that most, drove deep into my soul and made me go, that's a fucking fantastic movie, that was The Secret Agent, which it got a Best Picture nomination at the Oscar, it got a Best International Feature nomination, got a Best Actor nomination, got a Best Casting nomination. So it kind of overperformed at Oscar nominations. I don't know if it'll win any of those. Hopefully it will at least take home one or two. But yeah, of all the movies I saw in 2025, or from 2025, The Secret Agent was my favorite. It's the one that blew me away. It's the one I think is the best. Well, there you have it. That was my top 10 films of 2025 and 7 honorable mentions as well. So if you haven't seen any of those, or any of those sound interesting to you, feel free to go to my Letterboxd and read the full review. Sometimes they have spoilers, or I go too much into plot detail for some people. But you can check them out there, and some of these are streaming, some of these are still in theaters. You'll be able to find them. So, but thanks for watching. I've been a little bit lazy lately with the videos and stuff, but there's one other video I know that I want to make soon about the horrible decision Alamo Drafthouse has made with their mobile ordering. And I might have more time in the next few months to make videos, so maybe you'll see more of me. But otherwise, have a good one, everybody. Go watch some of these movies.